Hello, welcome to the Dapper Gaffer channel. I'm Josiah Sjostrom, and today we're here at City Stage Studios in Rockford, Illinois, taking a look at the Litepanels 2x1 Gemini Hard, which Litepanels was kind enough to let me test out. The main thing we're going to do today is actually compare it to the Vortex 8. This light right here. In my mind, it's the most similar light on the market to this panel. I was just surprised not to see, at the time of this recording, a video out there comparing the two. I've already had the chance to take it on a couple real projects, 3 or 4 this month, very different scenarios, so have some practical use with it already, and I wanted to take the time to bring it into the studio and compare it a little more scientifically. Help you make a decision if you're deciding to bring one of these on your next project, or if you need both. Both is always the better option. Let's get that grid out of the way. It's not affecting our light spread there. Okay, so we've just set up the two lights side by side. They're quite bright, as you can see by my overexposed face. Man, are they bright. So let's start with like the intensity and the spread. When you're reading specs online, they'll tell you, the foot candles or the lux at a certain distance. But in my opinion, that's only a part of the story. The other big factor you're not considering is the spread of the light. You could have a little airy 150 Fresnel spotted in, that's brighter than something much higher wattage that's flooded out. So it's like, let's look at not only the intensity of the light at a certain distance, but like how wide that spread is at the same time, and that'll give us a better idea of the amount of light that these fixtures are actually pushing out. So how about let's kill the house lights though for these readings. So this is the Gemini, 156 foot candles. Or if we switch that over to 800 ISO, 24 frames a second, about 8 7/10 of a stop. So very bright. Let's swap over to the Vortex. You want to grab that, Kiko?
Vortex coming up.
To the eye, the Gemini seems brighter, but the Vortex seems to spread more. Let's see. Yeah, that's 100%, the Vortex? Yeah, we're reading like 88 at the most. That's why it's stopped brighter. That's twice as bright. Interesting. But now, you can probably see it better from there. Let's look at this light pattern. I'm just going to toggle between these. I'm seeing some spots. I looked at one of the lights foolishly without my gaffer's glass. It seems like the Gemini is more spotty. I want to back these up to see a little bit, see that spread a little better. I think that'll help us judge this. The Vortex is a smoother fall off, but it doesn't, but like the actual hotspot that I'm seeing doesn't seem to be that much bigger than on the Gemini. All right, so we've moved the lights back to 60 feet off the wall. Measured it with my handy dandy little Bosch laser, which is useful to have in many scenarios. And we're paying attention to the light spread, the light pattern on the wall there. We're right up against the wall here, as you can see. We have 65 feet of draw in this room, and we are at 60 feet. So, okay, so that's the Vortex. Fills out that wall pretty decently. Obviously, there's some fall off at the ends because it's a hard light. That wall is about 38 feet wide, a little over 38 feet wide. Swapping to the Gemini. The Gemini definitely falls off in a more pronounced fashion. Hopefully that comes through on our wide over there. So I'd say Vortex has a more pleasing kind of fall off, but Gemini is definitely brighter in its hotspot. Out of curiosity, maybe let's take a quick meter reading this distance. Vortex, 40 foot candles. And let's swap to the Gemini, please. The design is very different between these fixtures, kind of the diode layout they've got. Lensing, 565, it was 4.7. Very slightly less than twice the intensity. So yeah, pretty consistent with what we were reading before. Okay, so I wanted to get into what was probably the first thing I noticed about this Gemini when I turned it on, and what is probably the biggest negative in my mind about it. I'm not sure how well we'll see it on the camera, this green fringe that it has around the beam of light when it has no diffusion in there. That was when I flipped it on in the office when it first arrived. That was one of the first things I noticed when I was using it on these different projects. It really limited in my mind, or I was cautious about the scenarios I would use it in with the diffusion out because of that cast. And I'm not sure how well it comes across on the camera, but obviously there's this fall off of light, which we've already gone over, but kind of the mid fringe of the fall off there's a very pronounced green tint to it. One other thing though is like when we were at 4,000 Kelvin matching the house lights, I actually didn't notice it as much in that warmer range. So I tested back to the like 3,200, 2,700 range, and it does seem less of an issue on the warmer end of the spectrum. But let's be honest, most of the time we're using these things in daylight mode. Okay, let's take a look. It's really not there at all with the Vortex. So a very similar sort of form factor or idea, a different lensing system, but you don't get that tint shift. There is, the light does get a little cooler as it goes off to the edge, but that's kind of a natural sort of thing for the color temperature to shift a little bit at the edge of a hard source, even a soft source. But that green magenta shift is what's kind of funky. So back to the Gemini again. You immediately see how it's just kind of a dirtier sort of pattern, a vibe, cast. I don't know what the word is for it. Hopefully it's coming across on camera. Let's go read this thing. So I've got a Sekonic C700U that I borrowed from Caleb Pike. Thanks, Caleb, because I don't have one. But I figured we should objectively measure what this light is throwing out and make sure that I'm not just crazy. Okay, that's kind of high at the center there, but whoa. This is reading, can you check that that's actually 5,600?
56.
Interesting. So I'm reading like 7,900 Kelvin in the center of this light. 58 there, 5,000 there. Now we're really on the fringe, but 4,700. I mean, I'm hoping this, let's flip to this Vortex real quick. This is not my meter, so I mean, I'm assuming it's calibrated and such. Okay, that's the Vortex? Okay, yeah. So that's pretty much right on 5,600. Gets a little cooler, 6,000-ish, way out here on the fringe. Okay, let's go back to the Gemini again. Make sure I'm in the hot spot here. This is one thing I love about a gaffer's glass. People ask me why I use it, because for some reason not a lot of guys do, but especially if you're trying to like see like where the backlight is hitting somebody, this is super useful. You can go in there by the tail and be like, you move that light over, tilt it down, whatever. You can see right where the hot spot of the light is. So that's what I'm doing right now. I can see I'm right in the center of the hot spot. And yeah, so we're reading like 78, almost 7,900 Kelvin in the center of that light when it's set to 5,600. Okay, so that was the first thing I wasn't really expecting. I was gonna look at the tint, the green magenta shift, but I'm like, the CCT is way different than what I was expecting. But that's an interesting thing to note. I'm curious to test that with the diffusion panel in there to see if maybe it's kind of derives the 5,600 from the combination of that extra cool light in the middle and the warmer light on the side, which is kind of weird, but it's possible that that's what's happening. Okay, so now we're actually going to read what we came over here to read, which is the green magenta shift on this light. So we got the Gemini fired up again. It is saying a 1.1 green. Now that's actually telling you the correction to make to get that to pure daylight, or whatever target CCT you're going for. The 1.1 means that it's actually more magenta in the middle. Just on the outside of the kind of the hot area is where we hit our pure 0, means that that's pure 5,800 Kelvin. But then as we come over here, I mean, I could see how green it is to my eye. Yeah, 1.2 magenta, which means green. You need 1.2 a strength of magenta to correct for that green. Yeah, 1.4. Let's compare that real quick on the Vortex. And then I want to swap the panel in there to see the diffusion panel to see kind of if that corrects it, evens it all out. And 0.1 green magenta. I'll say the inverted of this is what this says, so it makes more sense. So 0.1 magenta in the center, but that's definitely within the margin of error. It stays consistent. Yeah. Yeah, there's basically no green magenta shift in the Vortex at all, edge to edge. It's just the temperature. Actually, the other interesting thing is the Vortex it's cooler as it goes to the edge, whereas the Gemini it's extra blue in the middle and goes warmer to the edge. Okay, I want to try putting that diffusion panel, I think it's back there on the couch, in the Gemini. We'll switch that on and see what that does to our color temperature overall. Look at that. Right on the money, 5600 Kelvin, 0 green magenta shift. And this looks to the eye pretty even all the way across. Just ever so slightly green off at the way far fringe of it, but that's like a 0.2. So that is way more usable. And that's a nice cast of light there. Yeah, let's switch over to the Vortex now. Wow, that's at 100?
That's at 100.
Interesting. Let's switch over to our light meter here. That's a 2. That's like 2.5 stops of light difference. So that, can I see that other one more time? Let's just make this a little more scientific. Okay, we've got the Gemini coming up now. I mean, to the eye, this really lights up this wall a lot more than Vortex does with that panel in there. And it's nice and even. If you want the foot candles, it's 50.5. Okay, let's switch back to the Vortex. And that's 100%. 100%. Wow. So yeah, 9.8. Yeah, 2.5 stops. That's like 5 times as much light. Okay, so hopefully you can see pretty well behind me here. Right now we have the Vortex up. I'll step to the side of the frame here. Vortex, Kiko's going to turn that on. Oh, it is on. That's off. And that's the Gemini. So you could see how much more output we're getting out of that Gemini fixture. It almost seems like witchcraft. I don't know what they're doing with that lens in the Gemini, but it's doing something good. I'd say the Gemini is a little bit more directional, but that's generally what Litepanels seems to do. They go for the kind of the directionality over the spread. Slight difference, the Litepanels slide in from the side, except for the diffusion panel. It's got a new method where you kind of flip up the top. The Vortex goes in from the top. So with the nice thing about these bubble diffusers is that it really, if you're going to see like the reflection of it on a car or something highly reflective, this just takes out all the multi-sourceness nature of it. You don't see any of the LED bulbs behind it. Now let's quickly lose the back diffusion and see how that compares. So you can see 2 layers of diffusion there. Yeah, see how immediately, hopefully that comes across on camera, but immediately you can see the different sources with just the one bubble diffuser in there. Set that down, flip this up, pull that out. But I do like this design. That's actually still one nice even source without the double diffusion in there. So let's take a quick intensity reading between these. I'm just going to go foot candles on this. 13.6. I'll swap to the Vortex. 9.5, kind of as expected. But the further thing to extrapolate from that information is if you want to not see the multiple sources behind it, you'll have to put that second layer of diffusion in, and it drops it down to 6.7. So as expected, you lose a little more light with the double diffuser in there. So if you're wanting more output and kind of an even light where you don't see multiple sources in like a reflective scenario, the Gemini is absolutely the better choice. I don't know, what color do we want? Magenta, pink, wow, what a strong color. Okay, so we were talking about the kind of the inconsistency of the light spread, or color, wise, with the Gemini panel with no diffuser in there, just the hardest version of it. So I was curious, like how that affects when you're actually throwing colors at something. 300 on the hue angle, and you can see on the wall there that, there's a hot spot, but the color does seem to shift a little bit. So it's not like a real even, it almost looks like a target kind of, like it bands a little bit, and it's not like a really cohesive, consistent pink canvas that we're dealing with here. So let me just compare that to the Vortex. Again, you have the fall off because it's a hard, it's a hard fixture, but I don't see that kind of inconsistency like in the color across it. So that issue does seem to carry over a little bit into when you're playing with full-blown colors too. Obviously, it's not as big of a deal because if you're throwing crazy colors at something that's probably not, your green magenta shift or temperature is probably not as pertinent of an issue, but something to keep in mind. I've never measured, I guess, like a colored light with a color meter. But since we've got Caleb's color meter here, let's see what happens. Under. If you get a close-up on the screen here, you can see it just says under. We can see the spectrometer, the color spikes in there. And if we come to the edge, we can see that like the blue just dropped down there. So you can see that the color is certainly shifting. I guess that makes sense, like it's losing blue toward the outer edge of the frame, which is what it was doing in CCT mode as well. So if that means anything to you, you can tell that it's different from the center to the edge. So at this point, we're going to switch out the Vortex with a original Gemini 2x1, which they call the 2x1 soft now to differentiate, which is a panel I've had pretty much since they released it. Absolutely love it. It's my favorite 2x1 panel. Obviously, we're going to do most comparisons with the diffusion frame in there to get some more close comparisons. But let's swap that out quick and go in to take some readings and come to some conclusions.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to swap it to the actual cord for it. Obviously, I've got the original Geminis on the truck already, so I've used them side by side on a few projects here. I've got the 2x1 hard fired up right now with the ultralight diffusion panel in it. So we are reading about 49 foot candles. Let's swap to the original Gemini. Coming up. That's 100% and 5600 Kelvin?
156.
Are you kidding me? 9.6 foot candles, so 2.5 stops. That seems very similar to something else we just read. The Vortex with the diffusion panel in there seems a lot more similar to the original Gemini, which I guess I kind of knew that already. Yeah, the 2x1 Gemini hard is way brighter with that diffusion panel in there. Wow, you can feel it. So that's 5 times as much light. That's like you putting 5 Gemini fixtures up there of the softs to get the same level of output. Since I can still kind of see those individual diodes, I was wondering if it kind of multi-patterned, but it doesn't really. It still combines it into one source. It's just one softer source. So that's the 2x1 hard, full up. There's the soft. Okay, so the 2x1 soft is it spreads a lot. It's very even across the entire wall. Obviously way dimmer. So while it spreads pretty nicely with this diffusion in here, it is more spotty. You can see a bit of fall off of the edges, and it's way brighter. So what I like to do is test how well it fills out a diffusion frame at like a reasonable distance. Okay, so we just set up a 4x frame of a 216, which is the diffusion that I like, full white. And I'm looking at the spread of the 2x1 Gemini hard coming through that frame, which is a very typical sort of situation I like to use them in. Get that extra creamy, soft source. I can see the sourciness of the light behind it, but I feel like it does still reasonably fill out the frame quite well. And we are pretty much 3 feet from the frame, maybe possibly a little closer in some scenarios. Just depends on how tight the set is. Obviously it gets a little more sourcey. Can you stop down to where you see it? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so I can tell that the soft does fill out that frame better. You don't see so much of a source behind it. It's almost like just one gentle ombre sort of bloom to it. Very, very smooth, which is to be expected because we're discovering that it's a harder throwing light even with that diffusion panel in there. If I move this soft closer to the frame, you begin to see the source more, but that's kind of so you can have a more compressed setup with the soft. It'll fill out the frame better than with the hard. But let's do a quick comparison on the intensity of the light coming through there with kind of a similar spread of light on the frame. Similar softness. A little sloppy on my cable management here. Good enough for who it's for. That's what I always say. Yeah. I'd say that's about the distance we would need to be to kind of have a similar bloom of light on this diffusion frame as we had with the soft. Actually, that's 88. That's inconsequential. I'm not sure that I can outright extrapolate that to like an 8x or something like that because we're just relatively small frame here. But interesting conclusion from that is the soft we can have a lot closer to the frame and still fill it out evenly than we can with the hard, because the hard, to kind of give that same softness across the breadth of the frame, has to be further back. Once we had the Gemini hard at a distance where it filled out the frame similarly, the reading I was getting on my meter was very similar. The frame of diffusion becomes our light source, not the hard behind it. It's the frame itself that is our source. And to get that kind of same softness, you have to have the hard back further than you would with the soft. And the 5 times more output that we were seeing, filling out this wall earlier, is not, it's almost an inconsequential difference, kind of that close. So I would say that with the ultralight diffusion panel in there, that's the only one I have for it. That implies the existence of other densities of diffusion. So if they had a panel that you could slip in there that was more similar to the diffusion level we're getting with the soft, I'd say they'd be kind of a similar light. But
The meter back? Yeah, we're done, thanks.
so that's about all the comparisons I was hoping to make between these fixtures. Just wanted to clarify that I'm not getting any money from Creamsource or Litepanels on this. I just got this light to test out. I'm just a working gaffer here in the Midwest, and thanks to Litepanels for letting me test this out. And just to further underline the fact that I'm not like, I know we talked about some negatives about this light. I'm not like in the camp for Creamsource. I mean, Creamsource makes great lights, love them. But honestly, I'm more heavily invested in Litepanel stuff. And when they released this light, I was kind of disappointed I had invested in Vortex because I'm like, well, this would probably fit better in my ecosystem. I'm not this huge rental house where I can have every toy I want. I'm very intentional about the lights I buy. And I probably, if I had known this was coming out, I would have purchased this instead of the Vortex out the gate. However, seeing all the comparisons that we've done today and being able to use it on set for a month or so, I can tell there's obviously a lot of similarities, probably the two most similar lights on the market in this form factor, but there's definitely differences and there's strengths and weaknesses. Something we didn't discuss earlier is the weight factor. And the Gemini fixtures are way lighter than the Vortex, and that's a big deal in my mind. Like, just if I'm on set working, I'm much more likely to grab the lighter weight light if we're like in kind of a fast-paced moving environment, which, let's be honest, there's rarely a time where we're not having to set up something quickly. So this is, I love how lightweight that Litepanels has been able to make these panel lights. The Vortex, well, it's built like a tank, and I feel like I could probably throw it off a cliff and it'd be fine. It's very heavy. It's a noticeably heavy light. It's definitely in the territory of sky panels, with ballast and stuff. We can find those numbers and post them here or something. I tend to prefer, this is a preference thing, I really love the layout of the controls on the Gemini fixtures with the kind of the radio button idea of presets on there you can easily access, and the control system makes sense to me. I love all that. The panel being able to see it from the bottom, so when you're on a stand you can see what you're doing, or if you're down low you can flip the screen and see what you're doing. And the Vortex and the sky panels and stuff, it's right on the back, which is really only convenient if you have it at face level. One thing about this that is a great upgrade over the Gemini Soft is it has built-in lumen radio. For this one I had to get the extra dongle to do that. It's great that it's built in natively here. Price-wise, they're a very similar price bracket. I think this one's actually a little bit more expensive street price at the moment than the Vortex. Two lights really going after the same market. Another big difference though is the Vortex is weather sealed and you can leave it out in the rain, and that's a nice feature to have. This is not. I don't know if the weight factor contributes to that. There is a little dust cover kind of rain shield thing that the Litepanels sent me with this that you can put over it, but that's just one more thing to get lost, and or you have to keep cello screen on the truck or something. But this is the light that the big rigs where they're just leaving stuff outside, built-in truss systems and stuff like that. That's an awesome light in that sort of form factor, because you can just leave it out there in the elements, and they have proven to hold up really well. This is not a light you would do that with. So if that's something you're interested in, the Vortex is clearly the better choice there. Just from a day-to-day usability standpoint, I like this light. I really do. The biggest downside in my mind about this light is that green cast that we spent some time talking about around the fringe of the light. I just think that's unacceptable. And in my mind, it really limits the scenarios that I would use the light, because you see that. It's very noticeable. I'm hoping that Litepanels can come out with maybe another diffusion panel to put in front of this light that would better combine, that color shift that you're getting, that is inconsistency, kind of that target style, weird stuff that was going on, to be able to maintain that incredible throw and intensity of the light that we're getting out of this without having that kind of weird color artifacting stuff going on. I would love to see that happen, but even barring the issues with not having the diffusion panel in there, I can see it's a very useful light. I mean, we're talking about 5 times more powerful with the diffusion panel in there than the original Soft. That's a big deal. And the fact that it was, what did we say, twice as bright as the Vortex, that's not saying nothing either. The Vortex is a very bright light. So, I mean, I was using my meters. I got my spectrometer. What is it called? Spectra. My Spectra Cine 4, which goes with me everywhere, and then the Psychonic color meter I borrowed from Caleb. I mean, while it's a fairly controlled environment, I wasn't being super scientific about it. So, be that as it may, I think we were able to at least conclude some general, as a working gaffer, general observations with some measurement tools about these lights that helped me to better formulate in my mind where these lights kind of to fit in day-to-day use. Well, thanks for watching our little lighting comparison here. Hope to do more of this in the future as we've got time. And hopefully it's giving you a little insight into, if you're on the fence about, investing in one of these lights or debating on, which light to rent for your next project. Hopefully this kind of gives you some information to make a more informed decision on that. Yeah, stay tuned to the Dapper Gaffer channel if you're interested in to see more lighting comparisons like this, like you get into some lighting techniques and best practices and things like that. Subscribe if this is something that if this is a face that you can deal with, having to endure for this length of time. And we'll learn some stuff together. And if you're ever in the Midwest, stop by City Stage Studios. We'd love to say hi.